Welcome to Chandwell. My name's Michael and I'm building a rundown street of small shops down the front of my N-gauge model of a West Yorkshire town set in 1993. I've added the basic facade of this old brewery tower, including a faded ghost sign and arched windows. The building is based upon one in Otley Road in Shipley, and I've driven past it lots of times. I've always wanted to build something with that atmosphere on Chandwell. Let's take a look at how I approached getting the curved window frames, crisply folded edges, and how I went about making this lovely ghost sign. I use the free application Inkscape to do my ghost signs, and a simple black and white one like this is really easy to do. I start by making the painted sign look brand new. It's a bit too black to start with, so I reduce the opacity to allow some of the texture underneath to show. I also add a little bit of blur to soften the edges and make it look a bit more like paint on a rough surface. I put a white rectangle on top. I reduce the opacity like I did on the text, but this causes the stone underneath to show through in a pale colour. It looks more like there's a transparent piece of white on top of the stone, rather than the stone itself being painted white. Let's go back a step. This time I add the white rectangle and change its blend mode to colour. Since the rectangle is white, this causes everything underneath it to be drawn in shades of white. In other words, it takes the colour away. Let's re-add the white rectangle from before and change its opacity. Now I move the two rectangles behind the black text and we have a newly painted sign that looks passable on the stonework. Looking closely, you can see the texture of the stone under the paint. You can experiment with the values and the sliders of blur and transparency and blend mode as much as you want until you get the look just how you want it. I want it to look a lot more faded and scratchy than this, so let's look at how I used a mask and a grunge layer to achieve that effect. I import a grunge image that I downloaded. A grunge image is a basic black and white image of a dirty surface. I start by making it the same shape as my sign. I introduce a little bit of transparency to make the black part a little less black. You'll see why in a moment. I group the text and the white rectangles so they are one item. And then, with the grunge on top, I select the group and the grunge, and right click and choose Set Mask. That's it, a faded sign, and that's all there is to it. So what happened here, and what exactly is a mask? A mask is a simple way of telling the image under it to draw the bits under the white parts and to ignore the bits under the black parts. Shades of grey from white to black get progressively more transparent. Let's take a quick look. I use filters, colour, lighting to make my grunge almost completely black. This time the sign almost completely disappears. Let's make it much lighter, almost all white. And this time much more of the sign remains. This is a great way of making ghost signs, and once you know the technique you can make them very easily and very quickly indeed. With the piece printed, I stuck it to its base layer of card with PVA and tightly wrapped the edges of the entrance aperture around the card with the help of my crochet hook. I made the glazed door using the sticky label method, which I showed last week. Finally, the whole piece was glued into the building using PVA glue. The building's frontage has elements that are set back in these lovely arched recesses. For this, I would need to make them using 2 layers of 0.5mm card. Once the back element was cut, I added the stonework texture, and then folded it around to make simple sills and remove the bare card edges. For the front texture, I included score markers. Because I don't like scoring down the printed surface, I needed to score along the back. I slit the score markers with my scalpel, turn the sheet over, and then using the back of my scalpel blade, I score between the markers. Once cut out, this allows me to create crisp folds down the edges of the texture, and the card piece fits inside perfectly. Once glued in place, I like to use my ruler to help get a really crisp fold. I apply PVA, introduce a fold by tipping the card upwards. This ensures that it is all straight and not wobbly. I then use my steel rule to push the fold into the card and smooth it down. Eventually, I tip the ruler forward and apply a lot of pressure to get the edge stuck. This gives a beautiful crisp edge to the piece and will help to give the impression of right-angled corners to the building. I cut and tightly wrap the window apertures. The window frames are made using the sticky label method, which I showed last week. The frames are printed onto labels and stuck to acetate. You then just slice both ways along the frames and peel away the bits you don't want. To do the curve at the top, I just cut this freehand before doing the slicing with the help of the ruler. With the windows in place, I can add the piece to the building using PVA. After a final alignment check, some heavy bucks keep it in place whilst the glue goes off. I've made this building using 5 separately wrapped fascias rather than trying to apply textures to the completed building like I usually do. I was concerned that the joins would be visible and that it would ruin the overall effect. I did take care to keep the texture aligned so that the stone courses continue across the joins, and with the crisp folds and careful measuring, I think I've managed to create joins which don't distract too much. Certainly not from a typical viewing angle anyway. Here's a video that shows another time I was concerned that I couldn't get the textures to line up properly, these little buildings next to the Earl Chanfield Hotel. Join me next week then, where we look at adding a frontage to the restaurant and bringing this building to life. So until then, thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you then.